A large part of what we're doing with our clients at the moment is contingency planning for Brexit. So we're looking at products, revenue streams, entire business units, and taking a step back with our clients and saying, if the UK does definitively leave the European Union, what will that mean for your business or your revenue stream? And as much from a financial and a business perspective as from a legal one.
The first thing to remember is that the vote to leave the EU doesn't actually change things for our clients straight away. EU nationals still have the right to live and work in the UK under the right of free movement, and that won't change probably for some time. However, clients are talking to us about what they can do to reassure their European national employees, and we are working with clients who have staff members who've been in the UK for at least 5 years to apply for permanent residency. And this is useful because it allows those staff members to have certainty that they can stay in the UK long term. We're also working with clients to explore what the changes to the immigration landscape might be in the future. And that might be, for example, the removal of the right to freedom of movement and the replacement of it with some sort of points-based system, which currently does operate for non-European nationals.
The vote to leave the EU is going to have a profound impact on anyone who uses or owns intellectual property rights, which is pretty much any type of business, whether you're a tech company, a media content owner, a restaurant, a hotel who wants to do anything international beyond the UK is going to have a big impact. IP rights is perhaps the most harmonised and the most Europeanised of any of our laws. Trademarks, for example, has been subject to EU law since 1994. And that doesn't mean just our EU rights, because there's a pan-EU right, the EU trademark, but also all our UK rights have been subject to specific EU laws. Similarly with designs and to some extent with copyright. Many clients are concerned, rightfully I think, about these issues, and our advice has been keep in touch, we'll keep informing you about what's going on. Don't worry unduly for the moment about your registrations. Keep filing for pan-EU rights and thinking they'll cover the UK. We'll cross the bridge about what to do about UK-specific rights when we come to it. We're not nearly there yet, and policymakers will come up with solutions. As far as copyright's concerned, then, I think you need to engage with your industry bodies and think carefully about lobbying and putting your point of view forward, because the world there is going to change very quickly, I think.
We think it's likely that even if the UK is not a part of the UPC, that the UPC will come into force. There is still obviously a large part of the European Union is signed up to the UPC. Important patent countries such as Germany, France, the Netherlands are all party to the UPC, and we think that the UPC will go ahead and will be an effective system. What part the UK plays is obviously something which will be discussed and determined over the years ahead. Either it will be in the UPC, if there can be an amendment to the existing rules, or it will work side by side and in parallel to the UPC, and that could also be an effective way for the UK patent system to operate.
With regards to financial services regulation, the single biggest issue is whether UK businesses will be able to access the single market for financial services on a passport basis. This allows them to passport their UK licence across border into Europe without needing to get any further licences and with very limited administrative burden. The key issue is whether that's going to be jeopardised as a result of Brexit. What firms need to think about is, how much do I actually use the passport? Assuming we came out completely, are there alternatives? Are there exemptions? Are there third-party country rights that are already in the legislation that they can make use of?
At present, it's impossible to know what the outcome of the negotiations between the UK and the EU will be. The areas of principal concern in our market are, of course, the regulatory regime, any tax implications, in particular in respect to VAT, and obviously and fundamentally, any impact on the passporting of the financial services. This uncertainty can feel rather frustrating, but there are undoubtedly opportunities created by these uncertainties, which we're helping our clients to explore. We've also had a number of approaches from clients who are taking a very proactive stance and have asked us to undertake a health check review of their documents to highlight any areas of concern going forward.
Clients right now should be looking carefully at their revenue streams, at their products, and at their commercial contracts to see what steps need to be taken so they can be properly insulated against the business impact of Brexit.
One of the questions that businesses are likely to be asking is, what does Brexit mean for their data protection compliance generally, but also in terms of their obligations under a European law that has already been agreed and is already set to come into force. So at present, we have a UK Data Protection Act that still applies, and we know that the General Data Protection Regulation that has been approved will be coming into force ahead of any decision that's made around Brexit. So for those of you who are planning for compliance with the General Data Protection Regulation, they should continue to do that.
If Brexit translates into economic downturn, generally economic downturn means that there's more ethical corner cutting, and that means that corporations have to be more alive to the risk of corruption and behaviour which falls outside their regulatory environment, and that means I would expect that all the decision makers are looking at trying to improve their systems and controls in relation to that type of conduct. If there is a pushback by the EU which prevents access to particular markets or makes it more difficult to enter into particular markets, that may result in UK businesses looking to find alternative markets for their products or for their services. And in that instance, they may be approaching markets which are less regulated in relation to corruption and therefore exposing themselves to a greater degree, and that then requires them to think more carefully about how their interaction with that jurisdiction requires them to raise their own internal standards.
The immediate reaction to the impact of Brexit on the tech economy in the UK has actually been moderately positive. I think that's because the government is incredibly invested in the tech economy in the UK, and they're going to continue to support and invest in the tech economy, whatever the outcome of the mechanics of leaving the EU happen to be. There are one or two things we need to be cautious of quite clearly. Freedom of movement of labour, and where we end up with that whole debate, will impact the tech economy, because we have drawn very heavily in London on continental and Eastern Europe for talent to drive our tech economy forwards. What happens to immigration rules will clearly impact the potential growth of the tech economy in London.
I think there is a real opportunity here for international investors who want to come into the UK or expand their UK footprint. So clearly UK companies that have a very international client base will be good acquisitions. The sterling devaluation again makes such acquisitions more attractive from a pricing perspective. Furthermore, from a corporation tax perspective, we already have a very competitive regime, as current corporation tax rates are scheduled to fall, and so from next year our corporation tax rate will be 19%, and it's scheduled to fall to 17% by 2020. However, post-Brexit, the government is very keen to show that the UK is open for business, and it wants to encourage investment coming into the UK and to make us be competitive as possible in the tax environment, in the international tax environment.
Post the referendum vote, government has been very clear on the need for infrastructure and development and investment in the UK. So government knows to attract investment from overseas in planning and in real estate, it has to have decisions that it wants to take, and we're confident that government will take those decisions. The Neighbourhood and Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which was announced in the Queen's speech in March of this year, that does have a balance between neighbourhood planning and infrastructure. Now, in the planning sphere, some of us think that with government's momentum and determination to show delivery, it will shift from neighbourhood planning in a softer sense to more about infrastructure and delivery and development, because that will show will and that will show generation of wealth.